What's up, everybody? This is another story time, but this got a trucker twist on it, right? A trucking twist on it. So if you don't like trucker stories, if you don't like nice, compelling, interesting trucker stories, then just turn off the video. But if you do, if you want to hear something that's kind of interesting about the trucking industry or about trucking in general, then follow along with me. So let me give you this kind of story, right? So I'm going to give you the backstory too, but I'm going to tell you what happened. So today, I was giving some people a ride, right? Ride share. I was giving a ride share. I was giving some people. I picked up somebody in Ontario, California at the petrol truck stop where I used to park a lot to go see my kids and everything. So anyways, I picked up these two Prime drivers, right? Prime is a trucking company that has flatbed reefer, so forth and so on. I picked up these two guys and turns out I was taking them to the hospital. One of the guys was not feeling well, right? And so I was like, oh yeah, you guys are in trucking? Yeah, I did trucking for about 10 years. And I started telling them about it. I did flatbed and so forth and so on. I worked for a company called Tough Transport, very nice people. Anyways, I was telling them about that. And I said, well, how long you guys been drivers? How long you guys been driving, right? And I told them that, I still actually have my CDL. And they were like, oh, really, this and that? And I was like, yeah, so we started getting the particulars. So they told me that they only been driving for 1 year. I said, oh, you guys just started, right? And it turns out they were brothers. They were brothers from Dallas, Texas. And they seemed like some cool cats, right? So we started talking. I started telling them about, about how it's going to take you a while to get used to what you're doing. It takes, you're not going to be an expert in 1 year. And they said that they had planned. They both didn't have families. So they said they were going to save up and buy a house together. They're brothers. They they, I guess, get along with each other, unlike my brothers. But, but it was it was refreshing talking to these guys, right? Because obviously, me having a trucking background, they didn't really expect that out of a rideshare driver, right? So we started talking, going back and forth. I was telling particulars about what I used to do. And then we just found it was real interesting. And I told them, I said, have you guys heard the best trucking song ever made, right? And they were like, no, we haven't. What are you talking about? And I says, oh, let me tell you about Prisoner of the Highway by Ronnie Milsap, right? And they go, well, who was Ronnie Milsap? I said, well, imagine Stevie Wonder, because Stevie Wonder's blind and plays the piano and sings. And that's basically what Ronnie Milsap is, but he's white, right? Not that it matters, but I'm just trying to give context to the conversation, right? And so Ronnie Milsap has this song called Prisoner Highway, which is amazing, by the way. I'm not going to play it on here because I don't believe in posting people's copyrighted material, but if you should go check it out. Prisoner of a Highway by Ronnie Milsap. It's one of the most amazing songs. It was made a bazillion years ago, and it sounds dated, but the song is really good. I really love it. And if you're a truck driver or you want to get into trucking, listen to it. And it gives you a story about how this guy was a prisoner and basically to the highway, to the job of trucking. And he never wanted to do anything different. And it gives stories about things that they were doing, where to pick up, and he's going to be late, and he only has 13 hours to drive, and so forth and so on. So I really like that song. And I had them listen to the song, and these guys were about 25 to 27 years old. So they weren't old, but they were still young, right? I'm 42. So these guys were a lot younger than me. And so they were listening to me, and they really liked the song, and they wrote it down, and they were like, this is amazing, dude. They're like, we would have never thought that we would have heard this, going to the hospital, right? And so it made me think of when I first heard about that song. Now, when I first heard about that song, it was one of my good friends named Shawn Moore. And Shawn Moore, he's like 4th generation truck driver. This guy, I met this guy while I was at Swift, and he was a young kid, but he was a young kid who is basically like 8 or 9 years younger than me. But he had a lot of knowledge in the truck industry because his dad's a truck driver, his grandfather, this guy's got a Peterbilt tattoo. I mean, Shawn is a driver. Shawn is a driver. He's still a driver, right? And meeting him was very interesting because I was inexperienced in trucking because I knew very little about trucking. My uncles were truck drivers, and they're the ones that kind of got me into becoming a truck driver, and I fell in love with it, right? I fell in love with the idea of driving a truck on the open road, and I did it for a long time, and not as long as some other people that I know, but talking to Shawn was a very weird thing because he was such a young person that I didn't think he would have that much knowledge of something. However, once you get to talk to this guy, you see that he has a lot of knowledge about trucking beyond his years. That what was interesting about him and what really compelled me to want to try to be his friend. Because in reality, he had a bunch of information and knowledge, you know, in my past, having various jobs and getting promoted to management and all this other stuff. You learn right away that if there's somebody that has a lot of knowledge or information, you befriend them and you try to gain that knowledge, right? You look for the people that have the wisdom, and you be their friend, and you try to get some of that wisdom. You hope that they allow you to partake in some of that wisdom. And just talking to him and his father and, you know, meeting everybody. Shawn's got a really solid family. But it was this whole thing. He's the one that kind of introduced me to that song. Now, to connect the dots to this whole Ronnie Millsap story, I have another trucking friend that I met at Tough Transport that is family with Ronnie Millsap, that knows, you know, they're kin somehow. And so that kind of rang full circle with this whole trucking thing, that all these friends that you meet in the trucking business, that it doesn't matter what they believe in. It doesn't matter. I mean, it matters what they believe in, but it doesn't matter whether you're Republican or Democrat. They're good people. There was good people out there, and it really taught me a lesson on how to kind of see people for who they are. And so there's 100 of these stories that I'm going to eventually start sharing about people that I've met, that I've come across, that are solid people, and just, you know, the funny stories. And, you know, you can tell that I like talking to people and I love interacting with people. And this was just one story of meeting my buddy Shawn Moore, and we're friends to this day. And, you know, and he's over there doing his thing, and, you know, he's living his life. And it was a real honor to meet that guy, because he was kind of the epitome of what truck driving is. Now, there's a bunch of other friends that I met that exemplified truck driving too. I met a lot of people that had 30, 40 years experience, a lot of people that were second generation, and a lot of people that just, you meet them and they're, you know, they're down to earth people. They're not people that you would always ask them for help and they would help you no matter what. These are the people that would see people struggling at the truck stop and maybe offer to help. Not necessarily giving people money, but if you saw another driver struggling with something, you lend a hand, right? And so they tell you stories about this kind of stuff, so then it compels you to want to be that kind of person. And I think that's what we miss in today's age, in the modern thing of trucking, that everybody talks about how trucking has lost its this, lost its that. It's because we lost this idea that you don't necessarily, that you learn something from people, that it doesn't have to be taught in your face. It doesn't have to you don't have to tell somebody, listen to what I'm saying and you'll learn something. Sometimes you just have to shut up and listen and help. A lot of these old time truck drivers that I met, I just shut up and listened and helped and went above and beyond, because I knew that person had the knowledge. I knew that person had the skill, and they had the confidence, and they knew what they were doing. And I didn't have that yet. Trucking is a very difficult job because it requires you to handle many, many aspects of life. You got to be able to take command of that truck. You got to be able to understand what your limitations are. You have to be able to have a positive attitude. You have to be able to have a no quit mentality. And so all that happens over time. You can't just create this mental fortitude that makes you a great truck driver. It happens only through time. And so then when you run into these people, like there's this guy that's out in Dallas, Texas, and that's another story, that he's ultimate confidence, right? You talk to him and he knows all the tricks. You talk to him about your problem of what you can't do, and he can give you an idea of a solution. Now, they don't always give you the solution. That's the powerful thing about an experienced truck driver, an old school driver, an old timer. Those guys, sometimes they're not giving you the solution. They're going to show you how you can figure it out on your own. And that's the powerful thing about the trucking community that I think that has been lost over all this period of time. So when I shared that prisoner of the highway story with those two brand new drivers that only have a year experience, they lit up. They were sitting in my back seat and we're talking about this whole story, and I was, feeling really good about it. And I played that song for them and they ate it up, right? And the best thing that they could have done was just listen to me. Now, I'm not the most experienced driver out there. I know people that have been driving for 40 years, that they have all their kids drive and they own companies and all this other stuff. I, by no means, am the most experienced person out there. But I will tell you that I've learned from those kind of people. And the underlying theme of the whole thing is just shut up and listen, and you might learn something so you can be better. And so that was kind of the whole theme of the thing. And these guys, they were quiet. They listened to the song They didn't like it because it wasn't new age. They just listened to it and they wanted to be part of that. I sold them on the idea that an old school truck driver has intrinsic value in it, and that song was a representation of the old school ways that even I don't even know about. Right? I don't have 40 years of driving experience. I started driving in 2009. Now, this song was made in the 70s. You know, this reflects the 70s and 80s time period where it was true old school truck driving, where the trucks were uncomfortable and you had to be a bad dude or woman, you know, mostly dudes because it was mostly men back then, right? There's a lot of women in truck driving now. I'm not taking anything away from that. But back in the day, it was mostly dominated by men. And you had to be a gritty person. You had to be tough. You had to be somebody with a lot of mental fortitude to be a truck driver. So I think that hopefully I did my part and I shared and I passed on that hopefully they share with their other prime friend drivers. And they do that and they keep going and they put themselves in that situation where they say, this guy showed us this song. You should listen to this. So hopefully that was, you know, that was a little bit, hopefully it was a little inspiring. I don't know. It's just something I wanted to post. I had a thought about it. I'm going to put it out there. If you like it, great. If you don't, great. If you give it a thumbs up, great. If you subscribe, great. If you don't, great. It doesn't matter to me. I'm posting it because this is what I like to post. This is what I find interesting to me. And the trucking community is never served well enough. We don't give our drivers enough credit for what they do. And I'm always going to shout at the mountaintop that they need to get more respect, more pay, and just more general awareness in the community that they do a lot. We see posts all the time on Facebook and YouTube and all this other stuff about how you seen a Walmart shelves were empty within a couple of days because a snowstorm shut down the roads. That's because truck drivers couldn't get to you on a daily basis. That being said, it's a difficult job. It can be done and most people can learn it. And in order for you to be a good truck driver, a driver, we're not talking D-R-I-V-E-R. We're talking D-R-I-V-A-H, a driver. You got to hammer down and you got to listen. And when you see those old timers, show them some respect. When you see a dude that looks like he got 1,000,000 miles on his face and he's out there driving a big rig and he comes out, show some respect because those guys have been through a lot. They've been through the times where you had to use a payphone to communicate. They've been through the times where there were no cell phones, where it was, you know, everything was written on a board and it wasn't so easy. Now, you know, things are a lot different. So let's kind of pay them respect. But anyways, Prisoners of the Highway by Ronnie Millsap. Check it out. Like and subscribe. I'm going to start sharing more stories like this. Talk to you later. Bye.